going.
Okay, let's do it.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today's speaker is wonderful Elizabeth Davie. She started last year, and I thought she started at the beginning of last year. It turned out it was only August, and she's been here only about 6 months, and still she feels like she's been here for a long, long time. Anyway, she's been very helpful and incredibly a good and helpful coordinator of the hub. And today's talk is titled "Sending the Clown," and the reason why will be revealed very soon. And please welcome Elizabeth Davie.
Pat myself. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm delivering this talk and we're gathered today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It's such a privilege to be here. I grew up here, and to be here today to speak to you all is really exciting. I'm a bit nervous. But yeah, I'm really excited to share this talk with you, and I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. Yoshi and I actually came up with the title of the talk together. He came to me and he said, "What is your talk called?" And we were joking around because, as some of you may know, I think most of you would know, I am a clown. That's what I do outside of here. And so we were like, maybe we'll call it "Sending the Clown." And I wanted to explain, in case you weren't familiar with that expression, what that means is it's what you do when all the other options have failed. When the show is going really badly, you're like, oh, try jokes, send in the clowns and see if they can save it, which I just think is funny. And a comedy of errors. My favorite clown teacher, Giovanni Fascetti, I'll talk about him a little bit later in the talk, but he's really obsessed with the etymology of words, so where a word comes from and what it means. And error is a word he loves because he says the root of the word is errare, which is to stray from the path in Latin. And so it's not actually that you've done anything wrong. It's that you've just gone somewhere unexpected and you're going to learn something on the way. And so that's why I had this sort of subtitle of a comedy of errors, because I'm actually really proud of all my errors. And I have made so many. And that sort of twisting path of life. And I really like that definition. So welcome to this talk. I'm going to talk about my life and my work and my studies and all the things I'm interested in. And I said there was no participation. I am not going to make anyone do anything. But at the end, I thought I might demonstrate something, one of the games that we play in FAM with you. It's very short, very simple, and you don't have to do it. But I'm just flagging that in case I can let you know when that might be, and there'll just be like a stampede for the exit. Everyone leaving. Okay, so next slide. I'll see if this, cool. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about my family and my culture. So my mum's family are Irish. My mum is Irish. She came here when she was 25, I think. She was very excited to come somewhere warm, where she didn't have to learn a new language. That was her thing. And so she's from Dublin. And my dad's family are Australian, but by way of sort of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, somewhere like that. They've been here a bit longer. And they met when my mum came here and was traveling here, and then decided to stay. So that's me there. That's me, and that's also me, very fresh. And this picture is near where my mum grew up, and it's I wanted to put it on there because it's my favorite place on earth. It's the Botanic Gardens in Dublin. And that's the church, like the main church that we would always go to. My mum is Catholic, obviously. I was raised Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic. I have many issues with the Catholic Church, but yeah, it's a place I would spend a lot of time as a child. And I really love the gardens. It's just so beautiful. Like there's this rose garden. I can smell it if I think about it in my mind. Next slide. I grew up in the Dandenongs, so in the outer east of Melbourne. On the mountain, like on a hill. It was like 45 degrees, like genuinely quite difficult to get up and a bit dangerous. And I loved going to the park more than my expression would have you believe in most of those photos. And yeah, I have a younger brother who's 5 years younger. His name is Peter. And there's a clown. I found uncanny little like things throughout my childhood or stories and things like that where clowns would come up. So I found this toy that I've had for a very, very long time, a few years ago. I forgot, it's not the only one. So I was maybe there's some kind of like echo of what was to come. And I went to school at a Catholic school in Fentree Gully, so out again in the Outer East. I loved imaginary games. I was obsessed with that. I was a ringleader. I was like, today we're going to be horses, organizing all that. And my year 1 teacher once told my mum in a parent-teacher interview that I came to school like it was Oaks Day at the races. I was really excited to socialize with my friends, and not that fussed about what he was talking about. A lot of people think that I would have been the class clown as a child because I would have, because of where I ended up, but I actually wasn't. I was very obsessed with getting things right. I was actually, despite the sort of Oaks Day at the races like vibe, I was very, very diligent at school. I really loved learning and I loved being the best at everything. That was very important to me. So I got really good grades and I never got in trouble. I remember once I got in trouble and I cried. I was so scared. And so I wasn't at all okay with making mistakes. That was something that wasn't okay with me as a child. Like I really wanted to always be good. I really liked art and reading. I wasn't particularly keen on sport. I wasn't super energetic and sporty. I would a lot more read. And I would say my parents weren't super happy. Like it wasn't a super happy marriage. And I think that probably contributed a bit to me wanting to be really good at things, because you're like, well, everyone's likes it when I'm good at things, so I'm gonna keep going with that. So then I went to high school. So I got a scholarship to a private girls' school. And it was funny because the scholarship on the exam, you had to write a short story, and the picture was a clown. That was the inspiration for like your story. And I remember at the time I was like quite good at like, gaming the system with these kind of exams. I was like, I know what they want to hear. So I wrote some story that was like quite sentimental, where I was like, I was at a fun fair with my brother and a clown made him laugh, and now I am the clown, something like that, and making people laugh and blah, blah. And I got the scholarship. So it worked. But also be careful what you write in a scholarship exam in an attempt to get in, because you might sort of set something up for yourself. So at school, I was in a lot of accelerator programs. Again, I really loved to be the best at things. And I was quite across the board. Like I really liked art, but I also did a lot of science. Maths. Maths was the one thing I wasn't super keen on, but I did, I actually found this like name tag, which was, I think I got it when I came to Melbourne Uni for like a genetics workshop that they did for high school students. So I came along and did that. And that's a model of DNA that I made for a science class, I think in like year 9, I think over here. So that's like, yeah, I think it's technically correct. I mean, I was like, it looks really nice. Yeah, and so I think I didn't have a great time at high school. I think I was quite, as a teenager, my parents divorced when I was 12, and I got quite anxious and depressed, and I had an eating disorder for a while. So I think I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to be really good. And then I burnt out when I was about, I think, year 10. So I'd been so good, and I got a prize every year, and I was obsessed with being so good. And then, yeah, I got really, really tired. And so then in year 11, I didn't get a prize, and I was like, this isn't okay. I've got to make sure I get a prize at the end of the year. So I like really focused in year 12, and I actually won the psychology prize because I studied psychology, and the English prize, and I was the library captain. So I was quite nerdy, no sports. Oh yeah, I was asked that we were doing a school play, and the drama teacher like locked eyes with me and was like, do you want to audition for this? And I was like, no, even though I really did. And I was too scared. So I ended up playing this really minor comic role, and I was like so stressed and anxious. I didn't really enjoy it at all. And like, and I wished that I'd had the courage to say that I wanted to be the main character. Yeah, and so yeah, then I did the International Baccalaureate, which I really enjoyed because I liked the breadth of things. Like, and I think that's a shame about VCE, where they sort of grade things as like, this is more value than this, whereas I think the IB is nice. It's like art is the same as science or maths. And I liked being able to sort of have that breadth across different things. Yeah, I think I think, oh yeah, and the picture just here, apologies, you can see me now photographing in it, but these were my artworks that I did. I did a lot of photography in my final year, and I would find people in my school who looked like a famous painting, and I would set them up and recreate it with this doppelganger. So that was really, really fun. And I had like, you know, like a couple of hundred like girls from a girls' school to find for like, you know, these medieval paintings or girl with a pearl earring. That was the first friend I found. Yeah. So then I graduated and I applied to the Victorian College of the Arts, and then I got in. And I kind of didn't want to get in. I'd gone for it so I would look really keen when I came back the next year, because they said they always rejected people straight out of school. I was like, sick. Okay, I'll go. I'll seem like I really want it. Then I'll go traveling and come back. And then I got in and I was like, oh, well, it's such an honor. I have to take it, even though I actually didn't want to go right now. And so I went, and I dropped out after a couple of months. I was like, I literally can't do this. I don't want to be here every day doing, and there was really distinct streams, and you had to do photography if you applied to photography, and you couldn't even pick your electives. They chose them for you, which I think really contradicts the term. And so I couldn't hack it. It was 9 to 5 every day, and of just one thing. And I think that is also a problem for me. I really like having like a few different things on the go. But that was my first really big failure. Like I'd never sort of failed like that before, to like drop out. And I was really embarrassed. I didn't want to tell anyone. And at that point I was put on antidepressants, and that for a while worked really well. I was like, great, I feel amazing. And so I decided to move to Tasmania and do a double degree of arts and fine arts at UTAS, because I was like, I'll have variety. So I'll get to do all different things there. And so then I started doing printmaking, because I was like, then I'll always have a copy. I'll never have to sell an artwork and not have it anymore. The problem with that is that it makes your artworks a lot less valuable because there's so many of them. But yeah, so I was really interested in anatomy when I was at art school, and I did a lot of anatomical artwork. So the skeleton print there I did in I think second year, and I had friends pose, and then I redrew it as if they were skeletons. So kind of that memento mori kind of medieval thing I was really into, doing through etchings. And then in my third year, I was quite depressed and anxious, and I stopped my antidepressants, and I started doing these pictures, like self-portraits of myself as a zombie. So like, you know, no one asked if I was okay. But I really enjoyed the sort of like, I would do these layered prints. I would do one that was entire of bones, one that was entire of muscles, one that was entire of skin, and then cut them away like lace. But yeah, so it was, I did that, and that was my final exhibition. The two in the middle, there was a few others. And those are some friends of mine who dressed up. They were musicians, and they dressed up as zombies to play music at the opening, which was cool. Yeah. And so this was some photos of me in my 20s. So in Tasmania, I lived at college, which I really enjoyed. It was sort of a place where you could like, oh, I can sort of define who I am and be how I want to be. And that's me wearing a dress made of green bags at one of the college parties. And I also did my first play. Well, I mean, I'd been in the school play, but this was a play where I actually had a lot more lines, and I was kind of I was a character. And the play was extremely bad. I don't know if you can see by the photo. Like, it was just one of those things where it's like, this is free and there's a reason that no one wants to be paid for this script. It was really, really terrible. But I had fun. Like, and it was, you know, I don't know if I was particularly good, but I did enjoy being on stage. Yeah, so I finished up at uni, and I didn't really know what to do. So I came back to, I visited family in Ireland. So that's a picture of my mum. We were in Europe. And then I decided to move back to Victoria after that. So then, yeah, so I did a graduate certificate in arts at Melbourne Uni, because I'd sort of ending up in the admin of my degree. I'd ended up switching back to straight fine arts. And I was like, I actually really liked the sort of literature side of what I was doing. So I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'll do a few more units and try and figure it out. And then I drifted around for a while. I worked at a bunch of different arts organizations. And I'd say in this time I was still recovering from coming off antidepressants, because I think they really like took me a while to like equalize and normalize. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I was kind of working and like, yeah, just sort of drifting a little bit. But I found I was obsessed with comedy. Like one year I spent $500 on tickets to the comedy festival, which is a lot. There's a lot of shows, and I would see like back-to-back shows, and I would go pretty much always on my own. Like if someone wanted to come, they could come along, but otherwise I was out. I was seeing it because I was really, really keen. And then I saw a life coach, and she said to me that you're the composite of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that's when I wrote one of my earliest stand-up jokes, which was like, I want to find out which 5 people are responsible for me needing a life coach. Whose fault is this? But she got me to admit that I maybe wanted to try comedy. She was one of the first people I told. I told her and my best friend. I was so scared to admit, like, I think I'm funny, or, I want to do that. And it was really, it was very difficult for me to come to that decision. So then I went traveling for a few months, which was really amazing. It was just a great time spending, I think it was about 3 months, just sort of traveling around Europe. I visited my family in Ireland and just sort of toured around. And when I was in Paris, I met Michael. So this is a photo actually from quite a bit later, because I don't have a photo of when we first met. But he was at a clown school in Paris with a group of other students, and I met them outside a falafel stand, like completely by random. I was actually really irritated because I'd walked for hours in the wrong direction and come back, and I was so obsessed with getting this falafel. I was so hungry. And then this group walked in front of me, and I was like, oh. Anyway, I finally got my falafel. I was standing outside, and he came up to me, and he's like, are you with us? And I was like, who are you? He's like, oh, we're all at clown school. I said, oh, well, tell me more about that. And so they were like, yeah, come and have a drink with us. Like, and they were explaining all about this clown school, which is called École Gaulier, just outside Paris. And Michael had just arrived from America, and he'd been there a few days. And so we were like, oh, let's like hang out, and we'll go. And we looked at the sites and stuff. And then we kept in touch via email. And I was like, at the time, I thought as a joke, I'm like, that's my midlife crisis plan. I'm going to go to clown school. And I thought it was so funny. That's what I'm going to do when I have a midlife crisis. And this picture of Michael and I, the one at the beach, that was in Perth when we were both there doing festival shows in 2020. So we stayed in touch, and we've continued like parallel clown careers. So I had this midlife crisis plan. I'm like, yep, I'm going to go to clown school. And then I came back to Australia. And I decided to start stand-up comedy. I was like, I'm going to do it. So I met someone, a friend of a friend, who did stand-up comedy, and I realized like, oh, if he can do it, I can probably do it. I'll be okay. And so I found out how you started, which is you need to find an open mic, and like, or you need to sign up, and you need to go along and ask, and then you need to have 5 minutes of material, and you have to go up and do it. And so I spent time, I was really obsessed with funny stories, and like something would happen to me in my day, and I would think about it, and I would tell it to person after person, just sort of refining it on the way. So eventually I sort of created, I think I actually did a character spot for my first ever thing on stage by myself with my own material. And I don't think it was very good. Like, I mean, I read it back later and I'm like, early jokes weren't bad, but the performance would have really been lacking because I had literally no performance training. So I just got up there and I had memorized these things, and I was just like, rabbit in the headlights, just saying them and hoping people laughed. But for some reason, even though I found it extremely stressful, I just kept doing it. So I just felt like I had to. I kept going. I remember when I told my mum that I wanted to do comedy, all she said, she's like, you're going to need a skin like a rhino. And she was right. But yeah, my family were quite accepting. I guess they were like, oh, okay, this sounds like you like doing something strange. And they sort of came to my shows. So yeah, I started doing stand-up, and then I did my first ever festival show. I organized with some friends. It was improvised, which was, when I look back at it, I'm like, that's crazy. Like, why would you do that? But it was improvised, and we had like, it was a party, like a disastrous party, and the audience were the guests at this party. And we had sort of some vague scenes that we would interact between the 6 of us, and it would just be this sort of chaos. And it actually went quite well. It was really fun. And that got me started in doing shows. And then this was the poster for Party Banana, and that was us during one of the shows. And then the next year I did a two-hander show with my friend Nat. And that was like just straight stand-up with myself. And then I took the leap and did stand-up on my own, like I did a full hour. And then I also started studying at RMIT. I decided to do a Master of Communication because I was like, I want a degree that I can kind of use the skills or the things I like doing to get a more job. And through that, I got into RMIT. It's one of the pictures there, which was amazing. I think that was the thing I liked the most about studying the Master of Communication, was being on RMIT. It's an incredible institution that, like, I was literally on the TV, like it was Channel 31 and we were live. So it was like really the first episode I did, I had no idea that you were meant to look directly at the camera, like that had the red light on. So I was like a cat with a laser pointer. And I remember the director coming up to me really gently at the end. He's like, okay, so there's a red light on the cameras, yeah? I want you to look at that, like just look, you know. And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I learned a huge amount, and like, yeah, a lot. And you also learn like how much effort it is to film something and how you need to like really work with that medium and make things as easy for yourself as possible, because everything takes like 4 or 5 times as much time as you think it will. Yeah. And then I was working in arts administration. Technically, this sort of happened, this crossed over. And that was my first desk. So I took a photo of it. I was so excited because before that I'd worked in like front of house, and you know, I worked at the NGV shop and for the museum and things like that. And I was like, I want my own chair. So I was working there in like customer service and administration at an organization called Arts Hub. And so I loved doing everything. I did everything I could get my hands on while I was there because I wanted to upskill. I was like, I wrote reviews, and that's a picture of me. I was like, you don't get paid to do that, but it's like, I'll go along. And this was my boss, who was in the marketing team. She was amazing. I love Jane and still keep in touch with her. And so, yeah, I learned an awful lot. Like I was really trying to do things with the editorial team and the marketing team. I wanted to understand how the whole place worked. And it was an interesting, like at the ground floor, it was an interesting way to like, you kind of, everyone would just throw you things to do. They're like, oh, you're willing to do stuff? Great. So take that. And so I set up like a grants database, and I was working with the editorial team, yeah, with the reviews and things like that. And then, yeah, I decided though that I got to a point like where I was like, I know that I'm not really going to go anywhere else in this role. So they wouldn't let me move into the editorial team. So like, we don't need you there, we need you here. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was when I started the Master of Comms, because like, I'm going to move into this because I think that's an area where I love talking to people. I love communicating. So there'll be something that I can do in that area. Yeah. And then I got another job with an arts organization doing marketing comms, which was Melbourne Youth Orchestras. I was there for 3 years, and this is like some photos. That's me. There wasn't many photos of us, like, because it wasn't about us, it was about the student musicians, but I managed to dig up a couple that was like before one of our concerts at the Melbourne Recital Centre. And this was a rebranding project that I oversaw, which was really fun. A lot of work, but it was interesting just trying to figure out, how do you change everything? So the website, all your copy, and like, what do you have it as? So we were working with an external agency and coordinating that. I also really loved organizing the photography and the art direction and stuff, which I did throughout that time, and coordinating shoots with the students and finding fun things for them to do and to make the images. And they're actually still using my images. And I left a while ago. But yeah, so it was really, really, it was a great place to work. And I learned a lot about working with a very small budget, working with the arts in general. You always learn how to do everything on a shoestring. And also because they're often small organizations, you just get thrown things and you're like, can you do that? And you're like, I guess I can. And I really enjoyed that. So taking on stuff with grants and development or with project management. So I was part-time in that role, and I continued doing comedy on the side. And that's when I found clown. So in 2015, I did my first clown workshop, and I was terrible. I was the worst. Well, I wasn't the worst in the class, but I was in that cohort. I was the wrong end of the bell curve. So I was really, really terrible at it because I wasn't okay with being silly or making mistakes. I was very controlled. I always wrote my material. I was sure it was going to work. And doing that for a week. It was 9 to 5 every day with a teacher who came to Australia from the US. By the end of it, I just felt a little bit bulletproof. I was like, I've failed so hard for so long. Like, I kind of don't care anymore. Like, which was great. It actually brought a lot to my next show. And I realized that it felt like it had cracked my armor, and I needed whatever that was. And I wanted to explain a little bit about what clown is, because I think we have a branding problem as clowns. So it's not like tiny horns and like pies in the face. I mean, it can be, but that's not the kind I do. It's a kind of theatrical performance. So there's lots of definitions, but the idea of a clown is like, or having a comic figure like a trickster or fool or jester, is common in lots and lots and lots of different cultures, like from ancient Greece to indigenous cultures where they have like sacred clowns, and also commedia dell'arte. It's come through the sort of medieval court jester. It's actually a really long tradition of having someone who can sort of comically speak truth to power. And having this also can show us the kind of ridiculousness that is kind of, I believe, at the core of life. So they're a concentrated form of human naivety and emotion. So clowns are affected by everything. Nothing happens that they don't see or care about. And that's, I think, again, they're quite childlike in that way, but they're not children. So it's like tapping into that sort of core essence of us. And I think for me, they exist to help us all feel more, because when you see the clown feel stuff, you feel stuff. There's that mirror neurons and that sort of collective sharing. And so the modern kind of comedic performance that I've studied is from a French tradition, and it's really emphasizes physicality. And so your emotional vulnerability, because as a clown, you're actually sharing what's actually really going on. So you kind of have to be quite authentic, which is vulnerable. And you're very connected to the audience. So you're genuinely making eye contact and trying to connect with them and see what they think and being affected by what they think. So if no one's laughing, you show it. You're like, oh, God, and then I'll get a laugh, right? So that's where the comedy comes from. It's like yoga for your ego is something I like to say. It's really an antidote to being perfectionistic, because you have to embrace the mistakes. The mistakes are usually where the clown is funniest. And yeah, there's a real cheekiness and joy and play that I feel like, looking back, I probably didn't express fully as a child. And so it's been really cathartic and healing for me to make it a practice in my life to really go into that space. Yeah. Oh, there's one last thing I was going to say. Your clown is a part of you that's undomesticated. So it doesn't want to agree to sit still and be serious and follow the rules. And I think in our society, that part of ourselves is kept on a really tight rein, which makes sense because, we've got to function and we've got to all get along and work and do things, but it does need exercise. You got to take it out for a run every so often. Yeah, so that's clown. And then I did a show called Superwoman Money Program. So this was, I started to take comedy more seriously at this time. So I did a show about superannuation. No, but there's this story of it. It was a real challenge. How do I make the gender super gap funny? But what had happened is my super company that I was with at the time, I won't say who they are, but you can ask me later and I'll tell you. They sent me this email and they're like, as a woman, you're going to retire with almost 50% less super, it was at that time, than your male counterpart. And so don't worry though, we're here to help. I was like, oh, great. And they'd sent 300 tips for me to help me save money for my retirement. And there was 300 tips. And there were some of them that were there was one that was reusing your tea bags. And there was one that was buying cheaper makeup, going to happy hour. But my personal favorite was avoid divorce. Because not only is it emotionally devastating, it's one of the most expensive things you'll ever do. Yeah, so I was so irritated and I was furious when I got that. And it took me a little while, but I started doing stand-up about it. So this is ridiculous. And I had 300 tips and a whole heap of really dodgy copy from their website. So I basically had a script. I had all this material. And I was like, I'm going to make a show about this. So I did. I made a show where I had a character who was the mouthpiece of the super company. And she was this grotesque character. And almost all of her dialogue, I turn on the volume a little bit on some of the stuff that was on the nose, but almost entirely all of it is from their website. And I had sort of stand up as myself and I mixed it all together. And that struck a chord. Like I actually got press for that particularly because of that super company connection and the tone deafness. And then so I did well. When I did in Melbourne, I started to tour and I went to Perth and nobody knew me there. And I managed to I'd sort of got a big group booking and sold out the first night. And I was like, I'm set, I'm gonna be great. It's gonna be great. And then I had 2 shows with 4 people. And that was rough. I was like, well, I have to get up there and do it anyway. I love this show. There's nowhere around me. And I did. And I was actually won an award for that show. And I was nominated based on those shows with only a couple of people in them. So that's just to show you, you don't have to be the most popular thing to like really strike a chord. It is so much about your attitude and the time you have with that small audience. So never feel that you're failing if there's not many people there. And so I won that award and it was like there was 40 shows nominated, and I thought I'd done 4 shows in the first week. I was like, they're never going to remember me. And I had other judges, like a judge I knew from a different category being like, it's awesome you got nominated, don't even think about it. So I just went home and forgot. And then someone started texting me on the night of the award ceremony. I was well back at home and they were like, oh, you won. I was like, what? And so that was a really big, it really made me feel like I was like, oh, I'm onto something, like where people are really interested in this. It gave me a lot of confidence. And so I continued touring that show. Like I took it around Australia, I went to a lot of different places. And I've had some amazing conversations based on it because people would come up to me at the end and be like, that's my life. That's what happened to me. So I worked through the stories of what can happen to women in those situations. Because women over 55 are the fastest growing demographic of homeless people in Australia. And it is through those sort of structural inequalities where no amount of tea bags is going to change that. And so I think that's the kind of comedy I really like to make, is when I go to something that I'm like, this really upsets me, but I want to find a way to alchemize it. And so that we can talk about it and we can kind of get under people's defenses with jokes. I think that's one of the powers of comedy. And so then I did a show called Apex Predator, which was, I worked with my clown teacher, Giovanni, to create this character in 2018. And Lucretia was, how would I describe her? She's like, it's like a clown alter ego. So Giovanni's process is you work with your physicality in your body and you watch the ways that you move and the ways that you stand and the way you talk, everything about you that's not neutral. So it's kind of specific to you. And then you turn the volume up on that to find your clown. And he calls it the story that your body wants to tell. So it's something that the world has impressed, this character that has been impressed on you, that's just dying to get out. And so it's often stuff that you don't express a lot or you don't want to own. And that will come out really strongly in the clown because it's a way for you to like express it in a playful, safe way. It's through art rather than actually doing something in the world. And so my clown is, Lucretia is not my only clown, like it is an aspect of you. So it's, it can be different, but she is very, very different to me. She's impulsive, violent, and completely fearless, super charming. But she was like on a mission. She's like, I am the apex predator. I hunt predators. That's what I do. Not because of an agenda. It's just fun for me. And so she is, I think she was my response to being in a really terrible relationship for several years. And that was actually, I was in that relationship and it really, really crushed me down. And I don't think that was the only thing in my life that crushed me down, but I think it was a big thing. And so there was a lot that was really squashed and under pressure. And so when I went to clown school in France in 2016, and that was a time away from that relationship where I was like, oh my God, I have to leave. So even though I didn't like that French teacher very much, I had the crisis in this terrible relationship. I went there and I was like, oh my God, I have to change things about my life. So I came back and I was able to leave. And yeah, I think Lucretia a few years later was my response to that and to being sort of squashing parts of myself. So it's really a holiday to be her because she is not worried about anything. Like I worry all the time. I'm like, oh, did I do that right? Or this is right? Or I don't like making mistakes. And Lucretia's like, whatever, I'm out, don't care. And so, yeah, I created this show, Apex Predator, with Lucretia, which was about women's safety in public spaces. And that feeling of like, imagine if you were completely safe in a dark alley. Imagine. And that was the sort of, and it was through art. So it was playful. It wasn't like I was like, it's not a manifesto, a political manifesto. It's playful. It's a show. It's a clown show. It doesn't mean that much. However, people were very, very polarized. So people either loved it, and I had some standing ovations. I had people that came back multiple times, and I also had a lot of walkouts. And I actually put up some of the reviews that I got. These are audience reviews I got in Perth, which are quite small. It's okay if you can't read them, but there's ones like where people are like, this is so amazing, exactly what Fringe is about. I'm so glad, I want to come back. I can't see it again. And there was someone said, WTF, horrific, not comedy, interpretive dance on drugs, perhaps. You'll either love this show or you won't. I loved it. The creature is a raging cloud inside most women who wants to take back the night and make it a hunting ground. Great, amazing show. Take your teenage kids. Lessons on consent here. Or what's the other one? Horrible and offensive. This should not be considered stand-up comedy. Really disappointing to see this as part of the Fringe. So it was like, I had very, there were worse ones. I chose like a selection. But yeah, it was very split. And for me, that was a big lesson in being okay with not being understood and not having everyone like you, which was I think that was a personal lesson I needed to learn by making the show. Yeah, and so then back to my parallel career alongside Clown. So I worked for Riverdale Learning Centre in 2021, and I was the executive officer in a holdover role while they were in a period of transition. So the organisation had been very shut down during COVID, and it was opening back up. So Riverdale Learning Centre offers English classes and classes in sort of life skills to refugee and asylum seeker women. So it was a really amazing organisation with an incredible mission. And they really want to help the people who fall through the cracks, because it's really frightening once you start learning about it or looking into it. The class of visa you have completely dictates if you'll be okay or not. And so the organisation existed to make sure that like everyone got a chance to learn English, particularly women. And so it was an amazing place to work, and it was really great to contribute to that mission. I learned so much. I was the only employee to start with. And then we brought on a social worker. And so I had to do everything. And again, I learned a lot. And that's something, again, I really appreciate that, but it was quite stressful. So it was like, there was an amazing volunteer board that I learned so much from. And I had to do things from like securing grant money to keep our lights on, to like creating all our policies and procedures, managing partnerships, the program delivery, employing new staff and writing contracts, and the student enrollments, operations, the risk management, the building fit out because we moved. So they now have 2 people in the role, which I think is a benefit. But I really loved my time there. And I think the one thing I noticed when I was there that I didn't love was that I really wanted to talk to the women more, like the students, and I wanted to be around them, and I wanted to learn a bit more about their lives and have that chance to experience what we were doing as well, and to have sort of human connections. And I just found that hard because there was so much to do. And there were so many different things, and that was my role, was to get those things done. So yeah. And then I found shiatsu, which is another string to I wear 3 hats. I'm at CHDH, I'm a clown, and I study shiatsu. And so I found this when I was quite unwell in 2021. And it's funny, the story of discovering it, I was following an impulse. Like I'd never even had a shiatsu. I signed up for a 6-month course. And it was, again, a really big turning point in my life where I just discovered something that means a lot to me, and I'm still there. I'm still studying, and I'm completing a 2-year diploma part-time. And I've never felt this well before. Like I think shiatsu is about freeing the flow of energy through the body and helping it to move from places where it's become stuck. So in those places it becomes stuck and it's pathological, and you want it to move from there to places where the energy is absent, because if it's stuck in one place, it's not in another. And so you're really just trying to give the body the tools it needs to regain homeostasis and heal itself. You're not technically healing anyone, you're just creating the conditions. And so it's based on the principles of Chinese medicine, which is more than 2,000 years old. There's so much wisdom and understanding the world or the body and living in harmony with nature and seasons, which I really love. I love that, sort of learning more about that tradition. And one of the things I think, because shiatsu isn't sort of super well known, I think in Australia, like it's sort of, I think there are some misconceptions where people are like, oh, it's massage. And it is, but it's more body work, and it works on all the layers of you because it regulates your nervous system. You know the feeling when you get off a stressful phone call and your shoulders are around your ears and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. The tension is related to your emotions. Like, so the emotions that you're feeling is created out in the body. And so shiatsu is about releasing that so that you can release emotion. So it works on those sort of multiple levels and in the whole person. But yeah, I love my shiatsu cohort. They're just wonderful people. And that's my teacher, Jenny, who I started with. Okay, gotta keep the move on. Okay, teaching. So as part of my clown and performance career, I teach. So I teach clown, presentation skills, stand-up. And I love working with people and getting people to play. So I feel like once you get people to play, you really see their true self, you see their authenticity, and that's just sort of beaming out of them. And I'm very, like, one of the things I'm passionate about and very interested in is adapting physical theatre tools to other contexts, because we learn these amazing things about how to work with your body and work with your nerves, and how to sort of be more at ease when you're nervous. And that's so useful. And it's like this weird esoteric thing that only we know about. And so I'm really passionate about finding ways to do that, because a lot of the stuff we do as well is really fun. It's all through games and play. And that's like my favorite way to learn. And I think it's a really powerful way to learn. And so, yeah, I've worked with a bunch of different clients and places, including University of Melbourne and RMIT Seven Sisters Festival, this was a big workshop I ran there. I've actually got an online course. If you ever want to do stand-up comedy, it's let me know. So I was like, yeah, I've taught it for 7 years. Why not? I'll record it. Yeah, so I love teaching and sharing that with people. And play in the park is another thing I do. So that is once a fortnight, we meet up in the park and we play kids games for an hour and then we go. So it's, I realized I needed it. Like during lockdown, I worked on a show with a friend in the park, this particular park, it's Jones Park in Brunswick East. And we would be doing crazy clown things and running around and people would be like, what are you doing? Also, can I join in? And at the time we were like working on a show. So I said, like, not really, but I didn't feel good saying no. And I was like, you know what, one year, I think it was in 2021, my birthday, or 2022, I was like, I want to go to the park and play kids games for an hour, like no agenda, I just want to go there and that's what I want to do. I loved that as a kid. It was so much fun. Why not? And so I did, and some friends came and we all did it and we're like, well, let's keep doing this. So we did it every week for a while. And then I was like, well, if we're having so much fun, other people will. So I was like, I opened it up, yeah, to the public and was like, this is anyone can come. It's free. It's once a fortnight, outdoors. And we get together, play kids games. We're silly. And it's like a chance to be a kid again.
Can I send my daughter?
Well, I've been thinking about that. It's actually, at the moment, it's for adults because I'm like, I feel like, and I think adults don't lose that need to play. Like we all need it. And it's such an innate way that we function and it builds our knowledge and we learn. And so, but we're sort of told like, no, you don't get to do that anymore. You've got to be serious and grow up. But I don't think we lose that need. It's just sort of suppressed. And so that's what Play in the Park, it's for adults to just be like that, because you don't get it again unless you have kids and you're playing with them. But then you're in a different relationship where you're taking care of them and you need to be the responsible one. So this is literally like, you're on holiday. You know what I mean? You get to be a kid. And so, yeah, that's what I find I needed in my life. Otherwise I get a bit sort of stiff and stuck and, unhappy. And so I like having that and sharing that. But yes, maybe I should have like a kids edition. Because we were there one week and some kids were watching us and started copying us. And so we were playing What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, and there was this big group of teenagers and they were like, and they all started playing What's the Time, Mr. Wolf. And I was like, oh my God, they're like we're inspiring them to play. And then they came and joined us and that was really fun. Yeah. Okay, I gotta hustle so I can finish. Complex human data hub, that is where I am now and I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I really love learning about people's research. And one of the things I find the most satisfying is when I realize something, I find something, because I'm kind of scanning and looking through all the news and trying to find out about everyone's research. I love when I find something that could be useful to someone. Or I'm like, oh, you guys should chat. I love doing that. So that's something I really, really love about this. And also just the culture here and everyone, the research. I love coming to the seminars and hearing about it all. And yeah, it's a wonderful place to work. I love it. Yay. Yes. And so I just wanted to end the talk because everyone here is, researchers and researching things. And I'm not formally doing that, but I guess in my own way, I have like some informal research questions that I'm working with in the different areas of my life. And inspired by you all, I've got some research questions. And I'm working with 3 mentors. So this is Giovanni Passetti. He's my clown teacher from Italy. And he's an artist, natural scientist, and pedagogue. He's a multidisciplinary fool. That's how he describes himself. Say that. So he started in agriculture and ecology, and then found performance, and then also studied Lecoq. He studied performance with Lecoq, and then Gestalt therapy, and also a permaculture designer. This is Pedro Fabia. So he's also a clown teacher from Portugal, and he worked a lot as a hospital clown, and he also runs. He works a lot with corporates and takes clown into places like Google and McKinsey. And so I'm really interested. It's like, he's pretty amazing. Like they literally sent in the clowns in Portugal to like, I think he was telling me like a transport department was having all these issues and they're like, we're literally out of ideas. And they put the clowns in and they figured it out. It was very cool. And Jeffrey Bonwick is my shiatsu mentor. So Jeffrey is also really interested in performance, which is cool. So he kind of understands that side of it. But he's a shiatsu therapist and 5 elements acupressure specialist and counselor who's trained in psychodrama and internal family systems. And so I'm working with them, and I'm very lucky to have them as my mentors. And so these are my quotes that I had to talk about my research questions. So instead of reading the quotes, I've got them there so you can read them. But basically, our body has a memory. So our life shapes us. Like you see a tree in the forest, no tree is exactly the same. They sort of grow in a specific way because of the environment. And so that impresses and pushes stories into our body, into our form. The word character actually means to impress into something. And so our muscles, our fascia, our tissues, even our cells, they carry this information about our experiences. And there's trauma research that shows that we have frozen impulses, often from a traumatic situation, or there's epigenetics where you're coding information into the way that genes express. And that feeling like we're talking about where you get off a stressful phone call. And maybe you spend a year in a stressful situation and then you have like a lot more serious aches and pains. You're not just a little bit tense. Or you go on holiday and you feel amazing. You're like, oh, standing so straight, really good. So in physical theatre and clown, what we do is we read these stories, we read the impressions in the body. And so if I came into the room like this, it's very different than if I walked in like this. So you kind of see this character that's impressed on the person and you read it, and you all, like we all do that naturally. But in physical theatre, I guess we're really focused on it. And I will actually feel different in each of those forms. Like if I will feel less good, probably. I'm more nervous. I'll feel different things in one body than I will in another. And so we're interested in the way that the actual physical form creates feelings and emotions, and vice versa, the emotions create physical forms. And I think we're not encouraged to feel and express all the emotions we have in our body. Like we sort of live in quite a narrow bandwidth, I think, particularly as adults. But in our culture, it's sort of, this is acceptable. And we have good emotions and we have bad emotions. And obviously, like, no one wants to be raging and upset all the time, but they are going to come through. And what do you do with them? Because it's not like, it's not good to like get a cricket bat and like beat up a car. Like no one's saying that's good, but we need a good outlet, a safe outlet where those emotions can flow through the body, and so the energy flows. And I think sometimes we might go to therapy, but then we're trying to process purely through our mind what is actually in the body as well. So it's in both places. So that's where I think play comes in, because I can experience in play what it's not really possible for me to do in real life, because play is a liminal space between, something Pedro said to me once, it's a liminal space between reality and fantasy. So it's not entirely fantasy because it's not just in your head. You are physically doing something, but it's not in the real world. So it gives you this space where anything's possible, and you can have experiences that you need to have, and you can impress those onto your body. And Bessel van der Kolk, trauma therapist, has talked about that with psychodrama and the possibilities of psychodrama to give people experiences that they need that didn't have, and you can't go back in time to get them, but you actually can sort of have them in the now through that. And another like etymology of emotion means, I think it's movare, it means to move. So the emotions need to move, they need to move through us, and we need to be in movement. Yeah, and that's that quote of the only true homeostasis is death. That's the only time you're fully balanced. You know, other times everything's in movement. So I feel like through clown, you can work with stuck emotions in play, and in shiatsu, you can work with that in contact and in movement with the body. And so that's where I kind of see the connections for me are sort of forming. And it's a kind of therapeutic play. Yeah, I wanted to leave you with, oh, I didn't press the right one, this one. These are questions to you. You don't have to answer them right now, but I'm always really curious. So if you do want to talk to me about it, please do come. But yeah, what are the errors in your life that redirected you? And how often do you play? And when do you feel the most alive and present? So I think clown and shiatsu, one of the connections for me is that they're about presence. It sort of time slows down and you're really in the now. So yeah, that's the end. I want to give time for questions. And if there's time, I do want to show you a game, which is really fun, and it takes like 5 seconds. So maybe we'll do questions first. Yeah, thank you. Andy?
I have so many questions, but I will restrict myself to, so one of the themes in this was about the importance of errors and not being scared of errors and embracing them. And then another theme is play. And I can't help but think that there's a link between those, because what I kept thinking about it was totally agreement with the error thing, and that as an educator, half of it is I encourage students, it's okay to make errors, but of course it's really easy to say that and very hard to get someone to embrace it. And so like maybe play is one of the ways of doing it, but I wondered if you had other thoughts about how those link, or other ways that we could get people to actually embrace making errors, because I do think it's huge in science as well. You really need to be a good scientist, be willing to play and make errors and everything. But of course, that's quite in opposition to so many other aspects of the system, Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm actually reading a book on this at the moment with a play theorist who's a doctor, and he was talking about, I think it was like a aerospace engineering company in America found that their engineers who had played and done physical things with their hands as children had more problem solving abilities. So it actually so then they started selecting for that. But you also need it in the culture. And I think it's just there's a big thing about safety, and that sort of creating a culture of safety where it's like, because the programming that it's bad to have mistakes is coming at us every day from everywhere, like the tide, like it's washing in. And so it's actually, I think you need a practice of like something regular that you do, or like something that's considered, and you're working it like a muscle in order to make it feel, to have a bit of comfort with it. Because it's not like I feel great about making mistakes, like I feel terrible a lot of the time, but I'm trying to work through these like two things. And I think the tools and the play is a really good way, and having that, I think play also creates a level of understanding and safety between people that can make that feel a bit safer. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, can you share around and find the target?
Oh yeah, I will. There's an Instagram that my friend set up, and he did all the branding. It looks really nice. So I'll send it in an email. Yeah, so please come. Yeah, it's open to everyone. Yeah. Any other questions? I'll just check the chat in case there's anyone.
People saying thanks.
Yeah. Oh yeah, awesome. Okay, so yeah. Sorry.
Your background is really like error averse, and then when you found clowning, like you sort of worked through that with your like clown friends and stuff who you've met through the courses and whatever. Are the people who turn up already more comfortable making errors, are they better clowns from the start, or is working through that process, do you think, part of the fundamental, like what you sort of need to do to become a clown?
That's a good question. I do think that some people are more at ease with making mistakes and they will find it easier, but there's other aspects, I think. So like there's 3 ways of looking at it. Like we've all got these roles where we're player, writer, director. So the player is the one who's like, woohoo, improvising, having fun, and not afraid of mistakes. And the writer thinks like, what am I trying to say in this piece that I'm creating? Like, what do I want to do here? And the director is like, how do I put this on stage? So you have these 3 roles that if you're making a show or doing it in that way, you need to consider. And so you might be really, really strong as a player, but not the other two, then you need to work on them. So I feel like everyone comes to it with things that they need to work on and things they need to work through. And it's kind of like, I also think like, who's the best clown? Like everyone's a clown. Like it's such a difficult thing to be like someone who's better than someone else, you know? They might be more experienced, but sometimes beginners are way funnier. Like it's really like, I don't think there's a clear-cut way of saying who's going to be a great clown, but I do think being comfortable with mistakes will definitely help. Yeah. Awesome.
All right, make us do a game now.
Okay, we've got 1 minute. So I just want you to find a partner. So just stand up and find a partner. That's okay. If you've got anything in your hands, just pop it down. So Zoe, would you mind standing like that? So this is the simplest game in the world, possibly. So what we're gonna do is my hands are under Zoe's about 30 centimeters. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up and try and tap Zoe on the hands, and Zoe's going to try and pull her hands away. We have to maintain eye contact. We can't look at our hands. So if I'm maintaining eye contact with Zoe and I'm trying to tap her hands. And then switch. So switch the hands. I'm sorry.
It's slow. Come on.
That was everything I'll do as a demo, but oh my god, I had such a joy attack just watching everyone laughing. It's such a simple game and everyone laughs. Like it's so, I love it. But yeah, so I'm always happy to show you more games. Doesn't have to be the end, but for today we should end the talk. I think someone else needs the room. Thank you so much for listening. It was a real pleasure.
The people on chat are sad they missed the game, so.
Tell them I'll do it again. It's so simple. I can do it anytime.
Yeah. Can start our meetings.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you so much, everyone.